Well, welcome everybody, and I know many of you come week after week, and for some of you, this is new, and so I'll introduce our guest in a second. I should say we're recording this, okay? And we usually ask our guests if that's okay, but I need to warn you that we're recording it, and some of the faculty members have asked Georgette, by the way, if they can use some of the recordings for their classes. So hope that's okay. Just to remind you a little bit about why we're doing this. I mean, I don't have to tell you, we're living in uncertain times, and in March when I'm not saying that's when uncertainty started, but when we were working remotely, it hit home, and we decided that in uncertain times it was important to come together as a community, Merrick, and this is the Merrick School community with our in March it was our faculty, staff, students, and in last semester we met and we just discussed life in general. And in the summer, we kept doing this, smaller groups, and we discussed how we're opening in the fall. We found that, I found that very useful, by the way, because we had a very informal discussions, both with faculty and students talking to each other. I think that was at least useful for us. But people, I think, told us you like the connection. So we decided, in uncertain times, it's important to keep this going, and we'd make the ones for the fall semester. We really focus around a topic that really is important, I think, for the Merrick School and our future, and that is, what is the shape of business post-COVID-19? And that's a kind of topic or theme that we've been exploring in this semester. And we invite guests each week, and to help us explore that theme. It's an important theme for the Merrick School, because we're going to seriously look at our curriculum going forward in the longer term, because we want to make sure that we're teaching the most relevant things. But also, I think it's very important for our students to hear from our business partners and our guests, what they see as the shape of business, because after all, these are the people you're going to be working with in the future. You're going to be the people that's going to be shaping this business environment. So getting their perspective, I think, is really important. So our guest today is Georgette Kiser, who is really, some of you will have known Georgette. She's operating executive for the Carlyle Group, and she helps lead the due diligence and technical strategies across the various Carlyle portfolio companies. We're going to talk a little bit about, so everybody understands what Carlyle does. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Previously, Georgette was the managing director and the chief information officer for a Carlyle Group, and she led the firm's global technology and solutions organizations. And she's responsible for all aspects of IT, including application development, data, digital infrastructure, cybersecurity, program management, outsourcing. She previously held positions of increasing responsibility at T.Rowe Price, where she headed the enterprise solutions capabilities within the services technology organization, and she managed teams that provided creative solutions there for leveraging technology for their front office. Previously to that, Georgette worked for General Electric in their Aerospace Unit, and Georgette earned a BS in mathematics with a minor in computer science from College Park, University of Maryland at College Park, and a master's in mathematics, master's in science and mathematics from Villanova University. And this makes her, as you all know, one of the smartest people in the universe. She has an MBA from the University of Baltimore. Okay. And Georgette serves in the board of directors of Aflac, Jacobs Engineering, NCR, and at Talam Global Education, as well as on Claritas, which is a Carlyle portfolio company. And Georgette served in a lot of nonprofit boards, including the University of Baltimore Foundation. So And I do remember, Georgette, you were on the selection. You interviewed me. I
You were
remember.
hired.
So yes, that's right. So you can blame Georgette. Okay. So, so welcome, Georgette. It's really great to have you. And just remind you the format we use for this. Georgette and I are going to have a conversation for for a few minutes and to set the scene, and then we break into little groups, and people have a chance to chat, ask questions, develop questions, and then we'll come back, post the questions. We'll have a discussion on the questions. Okay. And I think it would be useful just to so everybody's in the same wavelength here, just about who the Carlyle Group is. We know it's a very prominent private equity company, but who the Carlyle Group is, and what it's actually entailed in being an operating executive in a private equity group like the Carlyle Group. So that'd be our opening question. Okay.
Okay. It's fine. Hi everyone. How are you doing? And feel free to ask any questions along the way. But Carlyle is a private equity firm. It's one of the largest private equity firms in the world. The top guys are Blackstone, Apollo, Carlyle, and KKR. Carlyle was founded by David Rubenstein, who is a Baltimorean. What's our word for that? Baltimorean. But he's originally from Baltimore. And private equity means that we buy and sell companies. And so basically, we have about 285 companies within the portfolio. We usually hold them 5 to 7 years. The goal is you have an investment statement up front, and you try to figure out how you're going to create value for that company so that you can at least get 3 times the multiple on a sale. One of the biggest deals that Carlyle ever did was Beats. So Beats by Dr. Dre, the headphones that were actually bought out by Apple during the whole IPO. So that was one of the largest. Carlyle has owned Dunkin' Donuts, has owned Hertz. Some of the major companies that you think of out there, Carlyle's held them, has bought them, held them, created value, and then sold them. As an operating exec, so when I was a CIO, I was in charge of the technology for the firm. And then when I moved out of that role to go into boards and became an operating exec, as an operating exec, I go in and I help many of the CIOs with their technology strategies. I help a lot of the CEOs just trying to figure out their businesses. Dean said that you were speaking a lot about COVID and post-COVID. I have to tell you, my March, April, May were just busy as I don't know what. I think I've worked 24/7 because you had a lot of companies that had to try to figure out how in the world are we going to get our employees to work from home? How in the world are we going to keep these businesses going? And how are we going to cut expenses as much as we can to keep these businesses going? So I've been involved in a lot of aspects of a lot of different companies, trying to help a lot of CIOs, CFOs, and CEOs when trying to figure out how to keep those companies going through this whole pandemic. And we're not done yet. We have a lot to do. There are a lot of companies now trying to think about how can everyone's expediting with respect to their digital transformations now and trying to figure out they don't really have that much money. There are a lot of smaller companies. How do we infuse capital into them so that they can actually do their digital transformation and then see it on the bottom line when they come out of it, they're able to cut expenses in other places because they've automated in certain places. So there's just a lot of work going on. And then cybersecurity became a huge, big thing throughout the whole pandemic. So I've been involved in a lot of conversations around a lot of ransomware attacks and trying to figure out what to do there. A lot of data and analytics is huge right now. I have a lot of experience from data analytics from when I worked at T.Rowe Price. So just trying to help firms how to organize the data appropriately, how to leverage the appropriate tools that they need, so they can actually take their data and make it information so they can make better decisions going forward as they're growing their firms. So the pandemic has just expedited a lot of things that people were thinking about for a long time, and now they actually have to do them. So it's a great time for information technology, for computer science, for people who are just problem solvers, to really kind of get involved and help to drive, the new world that we're actually into and will continue to stay into. I don't think we're going to come out of this. This is a new norm for us.
That's good. I'm going to get into, what that new norm is going to look like, but which who or which types of companies, you know, have you seen how were successful at making that sudden transition in March, April, and May? I mean, are the types of companies that do that well? And
well, it depends on your leadership. So the companies where they had leaders who had already had appropriate tools in place, and appropriate tools in place where, some companies, for instance, when I was CIO of Carlyle, I had a project in place where it was desktop of the future. And the goal of that project that I had put in place was that wherever you work, I don't care where you are, you'll have a laptop. You'll either bring your laptop to work and have it there every day, or you'll have your laptop at home. So when Carlyle hit the pandemic, they were ready because everyone had laptops anyway. And people work from anywhere they wanted to anyway. So that was perfect. So companies that we owned in our portfolio that actually had certain strategies in place like that, they were ready to go. A lot of our health distribution companies, they were ready to go because they're already doing distribution and they're automated every way so that they could do all of that. So I would say that most of the companies that were already leveraging their data appropriately had a lot of automations in place across their manufacturing floors or within their own firms. Those firms were actually ready, to move forward. And that took strategic CIOs. So we have a lot of companies that they don't have strategic CIOs in place. We have companies where they're mom and pop shops that we've kind of taken over, and they have heads of IT that know how to break fix things, but don't know how to really think strategically out there. So there was a lot of work to kind of do in certain companies to kind of move them forward. There were some companies that actually just came to a halt. We had companies that were in the hotel side of things, and the sports management side of things. They just stopped. Our United Road Service, which shipped cars all around the U.S., that came to a halt. So there are a lot of things that, that those industries just weren't going to make it right now, and trying to think about how are they going to make it for the future going forward when things slowly do come back. But there were certain industries that did well. We have a candle, Luminex, a candle company. It was doing amazing. The sales in Walmart were like off the chart for this company. Thomas Scientific. It's a company that distributes medical services to universities and hospitals. It's off the chart right now. People want to buy it like mad. So it depends on what industry you're in that was actually doing well.
And what, as we go into the future, I mean, what changes that have happened will remain, and what do you think we're going to go back to, as well?
I mean, you asked the word go back. I don't think we're going back anywhere. I think we're going forward, and we're going forward at a different pace now. I don't see us going back. And I think that, a lot of that has to do with, just the changes occurred. We had our millennials that were ready for this anyway. My kids, and, I have kids who are engineers, and they were like excited, like this is a great world for them. And we've had a lot of people who are more seasoned, more mature, and more older than I am, who've had to change their ways on how they do things. So I think we've had a lot of change management occur. Even look at places like education right now. University of Baltimore, at least you've had online courses and things like that at University of Baltimore. There are a lot of universities that didn't have anything in place and had to figure out, how do we get this in place to keep educating our students going forward? So I think these changes will continue to kind of stay in place. And there are youth, there are young people, there are older people that learn differently. They actually like this online learning environment. Some people don't like it at all. Some people do like it. So maybe there'll be more of a hybrid environment of everything we do across different industries as we move forward.
And one
thing I do want to add also is that what I've noticed, just from the boards I sit on, CEOs have actually had to change a lot also. They now have to communicate more than they ever did before with their organizations via Zoom. And just like Dean, like you said, you're communicating with your small groups at the corporate level, the CEOs are doing that an awful lot. There are some CEOs that will tell you, oh my gosh, I actually meet with my leadership team every day. And sometimes in the other world prior, he's like, I may have saw them once a month. So there are lots of changes because you have to in this world, you have to be able to communicate and listen, much more than you did before, because you're not doing the hallway conversations. You're not down by the water fountain having a conversation. You're making a direct effort to get on a Zoom call and have conversations on the Zoom call. And the people present on that call are really only the people you need on that call. It used to be you would have meetings and everybody in the world would show up. That doesn't happen anymore. Things are actually more efficient, the way that they're moving forward.
And will the senior teams, some of these companies like NCR and Jacobs, I think, are big global presence.
Yes.
At time, how are they seeing travel? Is that gone, or will it come back?
Travel is really gone. Like Aflac, their sales teams have had to figure out how to sell insurance differently now. And they are really escalating on their digital tools and everything for their sales teams as they move forward. Well, travel will come back somewhat because there's a cultural bit around people actually getting together. We've had conversations with that at some boards. So my NCR board, we just had a strategy meeting. And we got very strategic around how to hold that meeting in person together for 3 days. And we flew in, we got tested, we had the antibiotic test and everything before we actually went into the boardroom. Once you're in the boardroom, we were social distanced throughout the boardroom. When you left, you went to a certain place, a hotel, and that's where you were. And when you came back in the next day, you were tested. So they really made sure that everything was taken care of, but they wanted to make sure that as a strategy meeting, we had it for 3 days and everyone was together doing it. So I think there will be things that people will do to kind of make sure that people, that people do come together, because there's a cultural aspect that you begin to lose when you're too far apart. So you got to find that even balance along the way. But the safety of people is first. And I'm glad to see like a lot of CEOs are just stepping up and they realize how important their people are and they're taking care of them, appropriately.
And do you see a growing divide here between, I think you said the people who thrive in this environment are the people who are, problem solvers, data analytic focused. It sounds like digital, not necessarily digital natives, but digitally agile. That's what I'm hearing. And the population is less digitally agile, less data driven, less problem solving. These will lag further behind.
People are lagging, but I think people are getting smart about it also. And so a few years ago, I would always kind of speak to the retooling and reskilling that we have to have in America anyway, because the way that intelligent automations and machine learning was actually growing at it wasn't the fast pace we're starting to see now, but it was growing. And I used to always speak about like places, like McDonald's, where the 15-and-a-half-year-old who used to work at McDonald's is now being taken over by a kiosk. So as society, we had to begin to think about how are we going to retool and retrain for this new future that's coming. And I think that all of this is kind of expediting it. So you're asking like, do I see a divide? I see it because of where I sit and youth that I mentor and things like that. But I think it's up to us to figure out how do we, educationally, retool and retrain people for this whole new world that is coming about. Because the jobs that used to be there aren't going to be there anymore. And this has happened out through history. If we look through history many years, we've always had to kind of, change, what people have done over time. But this is a lot faster. And like you said, it's very solutions oriented, intellectual curiosity, the way people think. It's a different type of thinking. So I'm hoping that we figure out how we're going to do this type of educational training of people going forward. It's going to be a challenge.
Right. And this is my last question, but it's on a particular topic.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
One more thing before your last question, because the pandemic is not helping us at the youth level. If we see like a lot of parents trying to homeschool kids, a lot of places where economically, it's a challenge. You have parents that can't even teach their kids. So I worry a lot that kids were already behind in certain areas, and now they're 2 years behind, from what's happening. And that's a scare too. And I'm not sure how we're going to solve that issue. And it's not going to take our politicians to solve it for us. We're going to figure out in communities how we're going to have to solve this, because it's going to become a huge issue with a lot of our youth right now. And I also worry about mental illness, people that have been just kind of, stuck in these homes and not used to doing what they used to do and don't know how to transform themselves, because a lot of people don't know how to change, when change happens to them. And that's another big challenge I see coming on.
That's one change that we've talked about a couple of other times in this series has been around, and you mentioned cybersecurity. So we had a couple of different angles in cybersecurity. So I think with HireView, which I think is a Carlyle company,
Yep.
we actually got into a discussion. We actually got into a discussion about how employees want to be protected. And it was nothing to do with their business, but it was a kind of discussion we had in general about how employees want to be protected. And last week we had a cybersecurity firm out of Tel Aviv where their product essentially is around the marketing function. And so we were talking about really how cybersecurity is penetrating all parts of the value chain. So, as an IT professional, how are you looking at this canvas, and what kind of things are you talking to your portfolio companies about?
So we have a lot of conversations with our portfolio companies around cyber. Like that's a main issue, and there are basic things that we have to tell them to get in place. And the most basic thing around cyber is training of your employees, so they understand, the phishing emails that come in, and things that they should not be doing, because your employees can help protect you more than anything. There's a whole perimeter fence that you can put around, with your servers and all that. But at the end of the day, the employees can actually stop a lot of things coming in also. So there's your training, there's your backup and recovery logs, make sure that, if you do get a ransomware attack, do you have everything backed up in such a basis that you can actually bring it back as soon as possible? Because that happened to a lot of, companies, and I won't say, within Carlyle, outside of Carlyle, but a lot of private equity firms that are smaller that do not have these types of procedures in place. When a ransomware attack does hit them, they don't have everything in place to be able to restore their data, and they're stuck. They're at the hands, of the attacker, and so they have to pay them. And that's why you see some of these large ransomware, the numbers are getting larger and larger for what they're asking for, because they know that at certain companies they can go in and they can get it.
Mm-hmm. That's not good. Now there was a question. There was a comment, I think, from Jana on the chat, but which I'll just ask you before we break into groups. So I'll frame it as a question, because I think it's a proposition that as a parent with many friends and kids of all ages, fear that the outcome of schooling will bring to youth. And parents are exhausted from doing their own jobs and taking their frustrations out on their children, their needs schooling. So it's scary to imagine, that's what Jenna says, what will become of our kids and their opinion towards education. I mean, so the question here is, in the pandemic and how different school districts are responding and parents companies are responding to this. How big a threat do you see this, and are there other things that we should be doing?
Well, I mean, it's a huge threat. And that's why I said I think it's going to have to come down to communities also kind of working together. So Jana, one thing that I've seen, one of my good friends, she had her kids in private school. She lost her job through the pandemic. She moved her kids to public school. She did not like the way that all the learning was being done remotely. So she went to homeschooling, because she's home anyway. She got a new job, and so she's home anyway. And what she did is she worked with probably 6 neighbors, and they created an educational bubble. So think about the old one-room schoolhouses that our grandparents before us used to have. I mean, this is what they've created in their community. And it's an educational bubble that allows the kids to go from house to house, where each parents can get a break, and be able to do their work one day while someone else is the educational leader for that day. But that's community actually taking over and solving a problem in a different way. And I look at the work, I look at what they're doing. I'm like, God, they're doing a great job, and the kids are probably learning more than they actually used to learn in the regular system. But the parents are all working together now to solve this issue. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. It's just like a charter school, but you've actually just kind of put it in your community, the way it's happening.
I'm gonna give this question to Brandon, and then we'll break into groups because I think it's another concern. Because I know, Brandon, you work in service. No, you were working in service industries, Brandon, right?
Grocery retail.
Yeah, yeah, I
So
remember that.
because of that, they just because they don't have something, they're starting to take out their frustration on a simple matter and stuff, even if we can't control it.
It's a frustration.
And not just that, even like refunds. We don't get refunds. You can't get refunds anymore because of the COVID. So they're just taking out their frustration again.
Yeah, no, I fully understand that. And that's why we said like the mental illness, things like that, it's just gonna bubble up. And we just have to figure out how to help each other, you know, through this. And there's a lot of patience that people have to have. You ask from the corporate level, like CEOs and everything, they have to have a lot of patience, but in communities, there have to be a lot of patience, you know, as we move forward. And I challenge all of you, you know, as you have ideas and things that you think could make society better, you should bring those forward. I was listening to someone today during one of the panels I was on for HMG strategies in DC from the patent office. And he was saying that 50% of the patents that he's seen come through have something involved with AI or machine learning. You know, it's kind of like people are really getting out there with a lot of new ideas, you know, to try to help some of our societal issues that are happening right now.
I think it points out, I just before the break in, I mean, Kathia and I were we were at a conference yesterday, and we listened to a speaker her proposition, because she's a consultant, was that emotional intelligence was yesterday, and today's about emotional connection, you know, and digital emotional connection. But listening to Brandon and, you know, thinking of the issues of employees in our communities, it sounds like both. You know, we both need more emotional intelligence and more connectional intelligence. I think that's what she called it, connectional intelligence. And so we need both of these, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the connectional intelligence, I mean, I like the way that they worded that, because, I mean, we got to check on people. We got to reach out to them. It's definitely a different time for a lot of people, and we cannot sit back and think that they can take it. A lot of people can't.
So with that, I think we'll break into groups now, and we have about 15 or so minutes in the groups. I'll tell you when to do. We do this randomly, and if you haven't been here before, I used to tell you, Zoom has still not corrected a bug. And I was in a conference with 120 people where we were meant to be in pre-assigned groups, and it took 15 minutes to get into pre-assigned groups because there's a bug in Zoom on the pre-assigning. Okay, so we're doing it randomly so we can do it fast. So it means the students and faculty and our guests, you know, we have some guests from the business community, you'll all be mixed together. So I'm just going to say this, though I say every week. This is different from being in class, okay, students and faculty, you know, so you have equal, you know, you don't get any marks, there's no grading here, and everybody's voice is equal, okay? So that's the kind of the rule of the game, all right? And so I'm going to do it randomly. There's there'll probably be about probably about 4 to 5 people in each group, okay? And just introduce yourself and then quickly discuss, you know, kind of questions you can ask, and as well as, you know, what you're seeing as a result of what Georgette was proposing, okay? So you'll go into rooms now, okay? Georgette, you'll go automatically into a room, and you're welcome to stay there. If you want to go flit around, you can come back, and I'll try and get you in another room. Sometimes that works, sometimes it.
Well, hello.
Danielle.
How are you?
What a nice pleasure.
Yeah. I've been wondering how you've been doing. Looks like you're doing okay.
Doing great. Los Angeles is, you know, it's Los Angeles.
Yeah.
In all of its parts, right?
Yeah.
Best weather I think I've seen anywhere in the world that I've lived. You know, you hear the bad stuff on the news about the fires.
Right.
Most of the time, it's fantastic.
Oh, good.
You know, it's a big city, just like Baltimore. You know, it's got big city issues, right? You know.
Yeah. Good. Good. Hi, Cassandra. How are you?
Hey, Danielle and David. I'm okay. I'm on, I'm not showing my picture because I'm trying to work on a big presentation I have to do for tomorrow.
Oh, well, that's,
But I know Georgette personally, so I wanted to
oh, good.
show
Oh,
up, you know?
Good, 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 good.
And I sent her a message in chat, so maybe we'll connect.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Daniel, are you a student?
I am, yes.
Okay. And what program?
Accounting.
Accounting. Okay. Very
Great.
good. So, any takes on the conversation that we can bring back?
I
think
don't
it's-
think
Oh,
that
go ahead,
this,
Daniel, I'm sorry.
sorry.
Go
I'll
ahead.
I'll let you talk if you want.
Well, I've been to every single one of these, and there's a new thing that came up today that I thought I didn't think about before, but every speaker has said the effective communication is one of the most important things that's going to come out of the pandemic. So, communication now, communication later. So that's a running theme I've seen thus far. But I also think this the emotional intelligence, connective intelligence, and I think one of our faculty just put I put another type of an intelligence. I forget what it is in the chat. I really didn't think about that, but I can say emotional intelligence or connection in general has been my hardest thing with the pandemic, is that not having my colleagues for that water cooler conversation, brainstorming conversations, engaging conversations. That's the most difficult for me, because I'm a very team oriented person, so I need people all the time. And I'm very tech savvy, but I didn't realize how much I relied on people and colleagues as much as I did. So that's one of my discoveries during this.
You know, Danielle, another thing that I think is kind of related to all this is the whole issue of conflict management. I think, which is so interesting, because that field was originally sort of about international conflicts, and now being here, of course, domestically, is
Right.
in day-to-day life. There's more and more of these, frictional situations that are arising. The person who was talking about their kids and school and all of that sort of thing. I mean, one of the things that I'm noticing, because my wife is a school teacher, is the parents who are freaked out are taking it out on the teachers. There's been a tremendous uptick in parent-on-teacher abuse.
Wow.
In the last period of time. So, and it's not really being talked about very much, but it's all of a piece, right? It's all about how do we manage conflict, basically. Which emotional intelligence is part of, for sure.
Sure. Yeah. Daniel, do you have any thoughts?
Well, all I was going to say is I think that it's only a matter of time before we go back to normal. I don't think this will continue on for the indefinite future. After a while, maybe after a vaccine, maybe after herd immunity, this will all end and we'll go back to normal.
Daniel, are you working in the accounting field already?
Not yet. No,
Okay.
I hope to get a job. I applied for several, and people got back to me.
Okay, good.
Good. What else shall we talk about?
Well,
personal question: do you normally have a banner in your living room?
I got a moment. I passed my COVID test and I went on campus.
Oh, good for you. Good for you.
So I passed my COVID test. So I went on. I went in. I picked up a couple things, and my banner. It was in my office, and I took the banner. I'm like, well, I mean, everybody can see my family room. I mean, I'm here, but I'm like, I need a piece of my office. So that's really what it was. It was a piece of my office. I was like, I needed something. So I mean, I've been at the university 16 years, so I didn't realize how much of an affinity I really had. So I couldn't be there.
Well, it's really interesting you say that. I am finding one of the really big positives for me in this whole crisis is, quite honestly, the way the university has responded to it. I mean, I talk to, I'm sure Cassandra does too, to, you know, academic colleagues at other institutions. And I would say the bulk of my colleagues, their institutions have dealt with the pandemic very, very poorly. And I find, like, when I talk to people about what we've done and the clearness of what we've done and the simplicity that the approach that we've taken, I think people are pretty, I don't think jealous is the right word, but, you know, there's a lot of my colleagues who are being essentially forced into dangerous work conditions on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I kind of looked at what we're doing and I go, wow. I've said this to Kurt a couple times now. I mean, we are suddenly at the head of the class.
But I think what's different for us in the law school and legal education in general is that we had not done a lot of online teaching. So I think in the business school, you guys have a huge leg up on us. And we don't have enough support for course design and to really understand how to keep it interactive and keep the students engaged. So I spent a lot of time prepping, you know, just so much, you know, it's the same material, but boy, it's got to be conveyed differently.
Totally. So I'm totally sympathetic to say.
And you guys could probably teach us some things. We probably should have some inter-school seminars, you know?
We should, and it surprised me that no one from SELF has actually proactively reached out to us. I mean, we've done some.
I was to say there were some summer activities.
Yeah, but not real course design, you know?
No.
True. And honestly, I mean, I'm just going to speak my mind. I mean, some of the things that some of my colleagues have been saying about how online teaching should be done are not views that are shared by everybody. So.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think one of the things very clear about online teaching is that there is no consensus about the best way. And anybody that says there is a consensus is not really familiar with the literature. So what I'm just grateful for, and I think Cassandra just speaks to your point, is that having done it for 10 years, it's easy enough to adapt to these new conditions. Whereas what you're saying is, yeah, I mean, you guys have been face to face and for your careers, and it's a huge shift to get with. My wife is dealing with this right now in teaching fifth graders. So I mean, I'm very, very sympathetic.
So now, does everybody in the business school usually have an online class, every semester or every,
No.
And there are.
I really apologize for not being on camera.
That's okay. Don't worry.
Okay.
I mean, about a little bit more than half the credit office hours in the business school have been online pre the crisis. The number obviously not 100%.
60% of our grad classes are online.
Yeah, and generally with the with tenure track faculty, we actually have policies in place that you're not supposed to, as a junior faculty, to be teaching that much online because it's not easy, as you say. And so, you know, that policy has been adhered to a greater or lesser extent over the years. So, yeah, I mean, I would say most faculty have some exposure to what it means, and it's it's part of the conversation because we've been doing it, you know, kind of in our good enough kind of way for a long time. You know, I wouldn't say we're the world leaders in doing this, but we have a lot of experience, and we kind of know where some of the dead bodies are.
Yep.
Yeah, but yeah,
I should talk to our associate dean about, you know, having maybe just a brown bag. School.
I think that would be a great idea. I think there would be a lot of interest on the part of colleagues in being part of that. You know, I think it's good. And I think, you know, you want to hear from people with a variety of perspectives. I just think that there are some people who've been doing it for, you know, since we started doing online in 1998. Their view of online education is, I would say, different from those who came later on as the technology has evolved, and, you know, as we've become more aware of how cool you can make the online teaching experience. And the other thing, Cassandra, is I would say reach out to some other parts of the university, like Greg Walsh, for example. I mean, he does a lot of online stuff.
And he does it asynchronous. I mean, he does it synchronous.
Who is Greg? I know that name. What school is he in?
He's in CAS. Does the simulation and gaming stuff.
No, UX.
Sorry?
User design, user experience.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh yes, I know Greg. Okay.
Yeah, he's got their approach to online is frankly different than from MSB's, and so it would be a really great conversation to have around that. I mean, he had fewer advantages than we had when he started teaching online. He kind of had to make stuff up as he went along, and so he's in many ways more on the leading edge of how to do this because he's been out there talking to people. I think that would be a great like university-wide discussion to have. You know, you kind of get the provost office to like, you know, kind of a conversation. It's the time to do it.
Yes.
Well, I do look forward to the time when I can go back to my office.
Yes. There are days when I want to jump out of the window here. Okay. Just because I'm chained. I feel like I'm chained to a desk.
I was sad when Kurt said that we weren't going to be able to do commencement because, you know, I don't think, Cassandra, you know this, but I've moved out to Los Angeles. So, yeah. So for me, going to campus now is
a big deal.
It's a 20-minute ride to LAX.
That's a 5-hour ride to Baltimore.
5-hour ride to 5-hour ride in PPE to BWI.
Now, why did you choose LA?
You know what's really weird? My wife got an amazing job off it.
Oh, great!
In the middle of the pandemic, she interviewed for it online. It was like the job of her career, and
oh boy,
she's been following me around for most of our married life.
Yes.
I said, look, we're in our mid to late 50s. It's time for the roles to shift here for once. And
that's fabulous.
Well, and you know, I'm really lucky because again, this comes back to UB. UB has been nothing other than entirely supportive. You know, from my chair up to the dean and beyond. So I mean, you know, there's other universities where if you'd come to them and said,
right,
what do you do, they would have maybe said, but it was a very short conversation. So.
Well, that's wonderful to hear.
All right, I'm going back. Nice talking with you guys.
Back on video.
So people gradually coming back. Good. So now usually I usually have Danielle help me with the chat in case I miss something. So do we have questions to put in the chat quickly?
So I'm not supposed to be asking questions, but we did have a question. Well, we had a question that Ting brought up during the conversation, just around my thoughts on, you know, after COVID, do we feel like that people will be going back into the office, or what will, you know, what do I think? And I basically said that a lot of firms, I think they will not be back 100%, that they will figure out a hybrid solution going forward, because actually when you think of the business sense of it, they've actually saved and cut on a lot of expenses from having everyone in the office. So even though I think that, you know, they would love to, you know, have everyone there to preserve the culture of the firm, I think they actually have lightened up and really feel like, okay, people can be productive at home, and maybe we should allow this to continue. So that's just my thought. I'm not sure what will happen, but I do think it will never be 100%. Again, I think there will be a hybrid solution.
So I guess that, you know, that partly answers the question, I think, that I see from another group. What are the new things that we have, I guess, today because of COVID that will remain once we return to the normal? So one of them would be the more remote working. Are there other things that you see that, that will remain, once we return? Or will there be, returning to the normal may not be a good phrase, returning to the future.
Are you asking me or the
Back
group?
to the future?
You, I'm asking you. Yeah, Georgette, yeah.
Oh, so your question to me is what things I think will remain?
Yeah, yes, yeah. That we've adopted, like the returning to the remote working. Are there other things that we've learned in the pandemic that will just keep going?
So I think, so like we said, so I think that the remote working will remain. I think that, like I said before, that there will continue to be an expedition of digital transformation across firms. Everyone trying to figure out how to move to the cloud now and stop holding everything on-prem, so that they can do backup and recoveries faster, and they actually have their place. They have their data up in the cloud. I think that there will continue to be a big push of leadership, how it's begun to change and to communicate more with their organizations. I don't think that's going to be lost. I think that will be, it's a good change that we're seeing across many firms. And I think it will continue, that leaders will continue to kind of, leverage Zoom or whatever platform comes out after this to actually bring their organizations together. We were talking, Theodore, we were talking about OD and the importance of it. And I'm a firm believer. I used to tell them when I led my organizations at T.Rowe and at Carlyle, my OD person was always next to me. Like, OD is extremely important because if your people aren't happy, nobody's happy. So, and I think OD will continue to be very important post-COVID.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting question just this is a slightly different vein, but how important do you think it is for the government? This came from Geneseo. How would it be important for the government to help finance small businesses to adopt technology, and then that would prevent them from dying after the pandemic? But should there be more financing schemes for small businesses around technology?
Well, I think the SBA is doing something around that with respect to their loans going out to companies who are putting in budget requests, to leverage that money to enhance with technology.
Right, and then this is a sort of follow on, I guess, to the previous one where you're talking about leadership skills is still being important. Another group asked about, there seems to be a need for, would you agree with this? That there seems to be a need also for good conflict management skills in this environment.
So I mean, that's an interesting one, because some people have said conflicts have diffused a little bit because people are not together physically. So when people do come together on Zoom calls, they really kind of get to the point faster, with their problem solving and things like that. So I would love to see the study on it. I haven't seen a study on it yet, but a lot of people say conflicts have actually, lessened greatly through this.
That's and here there was a kind of observation that just as there's companies that are thriving because of the COVID, people see every day companies closing down. So there's no question on that, but there is a kind of question that follows from that, which is, do well-off corporations like Amazon and people like Jeff Bezos have a corporate social responsibility to provide resources to patients or children to help them during the pandemic? How far should corporate responsibility go? And I've got a follow on to that as well. So, but you go ahead.
I mean, that's one dear to my heart. And I do think the larger firms that are actually driving very good revenue have a certain responsibility to society. And I think a lot of them, we don't know all the details, are actually starting to do different things through the foundations of their companies across various communities.
And that's one of the things I was going to ask you about the Carlyle Group and your positioning. I mean, you know, because we know that you know, some of the larger asset managers like BlackRock are, you know, have taken, at least publicly, kind of fairly aggressive stands on
ESG.
environmental ESG. I mean, we're in the Carlyle Group. You know, where do you stand as a group on that?
Carlyle takes a huge stance on ESG with all the other firms and has been working very closely, especially across their energy sectors and places like that, to ensure you know, that things are being done appropriately. When it comes to diversity and inclusion, they're making sure Carlyle, it's the firm itself, and also all of its portfolio companies are ensuring that there are diverse communities with respect to ESG. I think the one thing that just came out with respect to Carlyle, that our largest fund, our buyout fund, actually has a complete diverse board. It was one of the first to actually have that across such a big buyout fund like that. So it's extremely important when it comes to all of the various parts of ESG. And every board I'm on, I have to tell you this, is taking it very seriously. And we're trying to figure out how to build out metrics with respect to ESG. So as a board, we can ensure that the company is doing everything appropriately that they should be doing. But that community outreach piece is a huge part of ESG also.
That's
there's not a board there. If you talk to any board member that's on a big corporate board, if they're not saying that their board is focusing on ESG, then their board is doing something wrong. It is extremely important.
It would be yeah, it's, and do you think that I think next semester I'm lining up a speaker, I'm not going to see who it is yet, but who is looking at metrics and ESG. And so I met him at I was actually at a BlackRock meeting I was at, and I debated against him. And my challenge was to him was that, you know, are metrics really what the companies need in this area, or are they metrics just more of a tick box exercise, you know, for around ESG?
It's not a tick box exercise. At the board level, the metrics will help us to better understand the information that we're looking at, so we don't have to have all of those detailed meetings. And then we can hone in on those metrics. And if we want to have a detailed meeting about something, we can tell from those metrics. So it's not a tick box, you know, one at all. And it'll be interesting, whoever this person is that you have. I mean, I'd love when you have them in. I love to hear it because I run the risk committee. Yeah, I run the risk committee for NCR, and we're right now trying to figure out how we're going to build out these metrics, you know, for the board.
Right. And you know, let me ask you a question about the question about, you know, public boards, because we actually we're actually kind of privileged. We haven't had too many guest speakers in the last couple of years who are actually on public boards. And so I'm you know, this is why I always worry about public boards. Do you feel that in the last couple of years that the scrutiny you're under in public boards is actually increasing? And you know, and here's my question. You know, in some ways, you know, a board, as a public board, you're meant to be hands-off operating. But how do you balance being hands-off operating and know enough so that you can hold management accountable?
And so that's the point of all the different dashboards and metrics that we ask for. So you think it's check the box, but at our level, that's the type of information we need so that we're covering the risk of the firm in ourselves, because we're held accountable to a lot. You know, I mean, our goal is to govern, you know, the risk of the firm. And so the enterprise risk aspects of the firm, the ESG aspects of the firm, you know, all the audit and risk committee, I mean, those are extremely important items. And like you said, we don't want to be hands-on in there. So we need that data, that information at a level that we can process it and begin to ask the right questions.
Right, that's very good. So here we're just about 5 o'clock, and here's my last question. You've alluded to this. We've covered a lot of different areas, but I want you to give advice to the students here, but I want the faculty to listen very carefully to this. But for the students, what do you believe are the kind of critical skills they need to be honing as they go into, some of them are going into the job market, some of them are already obviously working, but they're enhancing their careers. That's why they're here. So what do you see as the critical skills, your advice to them as they go forward in this new world?
it's a new world. And one thing I didn't tell the students, even though I'm a board, I'm also an entrepreneur on the side. I own a lot of franchises, and I didn't mention that. And so I'm one that I'm always honing my skills. Life to me is about learning. It's a continual learning. Intellectual curiosity is just what drives me. And I tell people, for a skill set for the future, you need to be intellectually curious. You need to ask questions. And you need to kind of really understand things to the point where, keep it simple, but make sure I understand it. I'm the person that will sit in a room, and if I don't understand it, I'm going to say, I don't understand what you're talking about, so you need to explain it again. And I'm going to ask you 1,000,000 times, to explain to me until I actually get it. Because if it doesn't make sense, then I just don't believe it. It's got to kind of make a little bit of sense to me for me to move forward. Mm-hmm. So if you talk about skills that are needed, going forward, so that intellectual curiosity is really important. Your ability to kind of communicate and listen is extremely important. Listening skills, a lot of people just don't listen. I see them make a mistake and I'm like, wait a minute, that person just told you, that they went through this and you went and did it yourself anyway. It just doesn't make sense to me, So listening, communicating, and just being curious about things and understanding, pick up some tech skills. But I always tell people, I don't like the word tech skills. I think it's all about learning and solving problems. I've always been a big problem solver. There's no barrier to me. There's always some way we're going to figure it out. But I don't see a barrier in front of me. We're going to either work around it, we're going to go over it, we're going to go under it. We may not be able to go through it, but we're going to get through this issue together some way, that way. So those are a few skills that I really tell people, that are really important. In the business world, you got to know the numbers. And so that's a big thing. Like I grew up in tech, and that was the important piece. Like when I went to work on my MBA and when I worked at T.Rowe Price with all the finance guys, I would ask them questions all the time because the numbers tell the story. I love mathematics, but I had to have a financial acumen as I was kind of going forward, and I need to understand that. And so I tell people today, really get in there, understand your accounting. Take your basic accounting class, take your second accounting class, because if you understand the basis of accounting, then you can move forward and really understand when it comes to running your own business, or sitting on a board and understanding, all of the balance statements and everything coming across, that you can see the story and understand the story from the numbers. Extremely important going forward. Those are just a few things, that I think that, are just important. And you got to be agile. You have to be in this world. We've seen what we've gone through. If you're not agile and flexible, and if you can't go with the changes that are happening, then you're going to be stuck, and you don't want to be that person that's stuck. You want to be able to kind of move with all the changes and just try to work through items instead of saying, I don't want to go forward.
That's absolutely great. I really appreciate that. So, and we're going to strive to make sure, hopefully students will do that. Okay. So thank you very much, Georgette. This is great. We'll give you a kind of virtual applause. And and we will next week. We have another speaker. It's Reverend Tony Draper. That's how she likes to be introduced. Who's Tony Draper, as well as being the pastor at AME, I think it's AME Zion Freedom Church. I think I've got that right. It's a large church, quite near, University of Baltimore. She's also, her family are the publishers, and she's on the board and the treasurer of the African American newspapers. In fact, the oldest African American newspaper in the U.S. It was founded by our great grandfather. So she's got a unique perspective really on what's actually happening in Baltimore. So we're going to kind of move, we've had, we were in Tel Aviv last week and covering global, where we've been, Georgette is in Baltimore, but we've been she covers a big array. Next week, we're we're going to be very focused on Baltimore and you know, what's happened to businesses in Baltimore and what's going to see it. Tony Draper, by the way, as well as being a pastor, she does have a degree in theology, but she also is one of the smartest people in the universe, you know. So and because she has an MBA also from the University of Baltimore. So so there are several. I see also several other. I see Joan Worthington, who's here, who was our speaker a few weeks ago from Fireview, is here, who's also one of the smartest people in the universe as well. So they're so this will be opportunity. The week after that, I believe what I have is we have a speaker from very different on strategic security, but talking about strategic supply chain, Heather McMahon, who's from the Department of Defense. She's a senior executive in the Department of Defense, former military officer, national intelligence officer, and she's looking at supply chains from a strategic point of view is something that she's really interested in. So this will be a really different sort of view about this world and this post-COVID world. And then we're going to take a break because November 3rd, we're not going to have a speaker. I think Marlon's going to provide us drinks. So we'll have a social, okay? So that's it. So thanks very much for coming. I really appreciate it. And again, Georgette, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Look after yourselves. Be safe.
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Hi, Georgette.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.